Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad to see so many faces here. I just ask that you have like a piece of paper or a notebook or a pen or something. I am going to ask you guys just to write down a couple of things. Um, so it would be nice to just have that nearby. And if there's something within view of you that is something that really connects you to your heart, maybe it's like your favorite blanket or your favorite plant or a picture of someone you love or your favorite crystal or something, you could just have it within your gaze to just be able to kind of look over and connect to that because we will sort of talk about things like that. So you have a moment to sort of grab whatever it is that you need and come back into the space. Wonderful. Great. And of course, if at any moment you need to sort of step away and use the bathroom or get some water or turn your camera off, that's all an invitation. This is your time to sort of use it in the way that you feel most comfortable. Um, so feel free to step aside and do whatever it is that you need to do. Welcome. So, this is our Staying Grounded workshop, and I am so honored and excited to offer this to you because these are my really sort of personal and intimate practices that I use to essentially feel connected and supported. And it's a real joy for me to be able to offer that to this community in hopes that you can make it your own. And so that's a really important piece to everything I have to share with you today is that none of it is mine. It's really all of ours. And that's an extremely important piece as you begin to understand sort of the theory that I'm sharing. If at any time something really resonates with you or is something that you want to bring into your life or potentially to share it with other people, I invite you to do so. None of this is mine. None of this is essentially anything that is unique to me. I think it's all information that's just kind of floating out there, and we get to grab it and bring it into our heart and make it our own. So please feel free to use anything that I share and have it be yours. Um, what I hope to be able to share with you guys today is really a roadmap, and that's how I see it. It's a roadmap both into ourselves and out into the world. The view that I have in this idea of being grounded and connected is that as we begin to dive in, we also begin to expand out. And the further that we go out into the world, the deeper we have to go into our hearts. Um, so, this is really an opportunity to see how what we experience in the outside world has a huge effect on how our inner world is existing, and vice versa. For me, I connect so much to the natural world, and I love talking about plants and birds and insects and the sun and the moon. That may not be what resonates for you, and that's great. Um, as I continue to reference the natural world, you may find that what comes up for you is something different. What comes up for you may be a book that you've read, or food that you've made, or a television show that you watched, or your favorite sweater, or your favorite city, or being in a subway, or something that is outside of what I've said. And that's really your opportunity to rewrite the narrative for yourself. So what I'm offering to you is just my lens, and you get to paint your own picture. Um, a large part of this whole experience is the understanding of seasons and seasonality. And my work with seasons has been so profound for me because as we see seasons exist outside of us, it's something that we can both depend on because we know that they're changing, even though that's another conversation about ecology and the environment. But we know that seasons change, and as we begin to trust in that change that always occurs, we can see that both reflected inside of us and know that we too are always changing. So so much of this is about beginning to flesh out our understanding of seasons and to see them played out in our own bodies. When we begin to know our own seasons of ourself, we can begin to reorient ourselves. And so we know that after spring comes summer, after summer comes autumn, after autumn comes winter, and the cycle repeats itself. So the investigatory part of going in and finding your seasons allows you to navigate a little bit more on your path, because we essentially know what's coming next. Um, so I think it's important to talk about what grounding is, because I guess we all have our own definition of that. And grounding is both, in my understanding, is both this ability to be connected and rooted into something. And like I mentioned before, I am going to relate back to the natural world a lot. And grounding is also the soil, and it's also the earth, and it's the rocks that make up the planet. So it's both this energetic experience and emotional experience of being connected to something, but then it's also something very visceral that we can go out and touch in the world, the ground. And to be grounded is, in my view, to harmonize. Because when we're grounded, we have to be connected to something. Even if it's just you going outside and placing your feet on the earth, you're being connected to something. And so then it's you and this other thing that get to come together. And now a third thing is created, right? It's not just you and it's not just the earth, it's your relationship to each other. And to begin to see that as we begin to have relationships with other things outside of us, we begin to develop more dialogue about how to have relationships with other things, in the sense that intimacy is created through harmonizing yourself with something else. Intimacy in the sense of being able to walk outside and maybe have a practice of just walking around your yard in the morning and having your feet on the earth, and you do that over and over again, and you begin to create your own sort of dictionary or thesaurus about the experience, because as you do it over and over again, there's a deeper intimacy that's created between you, your body, and the thing that you're doing, connecting with something else. So a lot of this is actually about dialogue and about language and how we use language to relate to other things outside of us. Typically, when we talk about the natural world, we don't really use gendered pronouns. And that's like another offshoot that we're not going to really go to in terms of gendered pronouns, but to begin to allow things in the natural world to have identities other than it. And that's, I think, a really important piece to this, that as you begin to develop intimacy with the natural world or with your cooking or with your favorite sweater, it becomes more than just an it. It becomes something that really has a presence in your life. So we ground, we harmonize, and then essentially you feel supported because now you have this relationship with something else. Two things have come together to make a third thing. And now this basket has been woven. And I love to do this with my fingers as I sort of discuss this, because you see that two things come together in sort of a complex way, and it gets a little bit stronger than it was before, right? So you and whatever it is that you're having this relationship with, the earth, walking in your front yard in the morning, you're now stronger because you've developed a relationship with something else. You have intimacy with something else. So we get inquisitive because we have this relationship over and over again, and we begin to ask questions about it. And as we begin to ask questions about our relationship with something else, we're essentially asking questions about ourselves. And that's really the root of this whole theory of being grounded, is how can you become important? How can you become something that is so valuable that you want to take a part of your day to investigate? And as we begin to coax ourselves out of ourselves, we begin to matter in a bigger way. And that translates into a million new avenues for connection. Because the more that we become inquisitive about ourselves, the more that we begin to matter to ourselves, the more our experience with things outside of us can deepen and grow and become bigger. And like I said at the beginning, the more that our experience outside of us grows, the more our experience inside of us grows. So everything's being mirrored. So you go outside, you have a walk in the grass every day, over and over again. You begin to create new language. You begin to create bigger intimacy with yourself. And then as you're experiencing life as a human, it's going to get a little bit more complex because you've added in more elements. And now you have this other, she the grass, he the grass, my friend the grass. You have this other experience, and it simply develops you as someone who is growing, grounding and growing, connected down to something and being able to expand out. So the more inquisitive that we get, essentially the more invested we are in ourselves. And this experience of being grounding, for me, feels like a really big like sign on the side of a highway that says you matter. And so every time I participate in whatever it is that I've crafted for myself to feel grounded, a walk in the grass in the morning, it's like that big signpost that lights up and says to me, you matter. So you could see that the more we begin to engage with this, the more we begin to feed this information to ourselves, the experience of us as a person changes, inevitably changes, because you're getting new information that you didn't have before. The more familiar you are with yourself, the more you can craft your experience of grounding, and it can become more dynamic. And so, like I said earlier about this complexity, you do the same thing over and over again. Maybe it's really special in the beginning and will be really special forever, but the more that we weave the basket in many directions, the stronger the basket gets. So after we have made it very clear to ourselves that we're invested and we matter, and me discovering me, asking myself questions, getting sort of comfortable with being available to answer, the more I can begin to weave the basket in many directions, the stronger I get. So we want to be able to take this thing in a spherical way, rather than just moving forward or just moving backward. We learn to see in all directions. And that's why seasons are really important, because seasons are spherical, right? They're always changing and moving and going in this sort of direction. So we learn to get around ourselves. We learn to see that I have patterns in this way and I have patterns in this way, but what about if I go this way? Something new happens. And as yogis, this is really fun because, and we'll see in a little bit, we'll see how we can begin to play all different sides, left and right and forward and backward and up and down, so that over and over again, we can find ourselves in the middle. And it doesn't matter which direction you're orienting towards. but you get to be in the middle. You get to be important. You get to be sort of the center of the experience. So that's my little overview of where we're going. um, so maybe for a moment you're thinking about what does grounded mean to you, and maybe you've jotted that down. Maybe you thought about it before you signed up for this. Grounded is, by definition, mentally and emotionally stable. And that's a nice definition, but I think that there can be much more expanded. I sort of mentioned the other side of that, which is physically like the surface of the planet. And I also think, though, being grounded is being connected to something, both emotionally and theoretically and physically, spiritually. Um, it's a thread that connects us out into the world. So to be grounded is to be available as the loom that gets the thread woven through it. So when we're grounded, we become more available to experience, and that means both experiences that can really light us up and make us feel very elevated, and also experience perhaps that is heavy or is a little bit harder to hold, or what I would call maybe like a winter experience, like a cave experience. So it doesn't just mean that by being grounded, then you're totally wide open, available to only the good things, because that's not life and that's not playing the season. So as we get grounded, we become available to the whole sphere of experience. Now, as we begin to sort of dive into you creating your own picture of being grounded, it's really important for me to highlight this sort of like tagline that I love to use, which is, this is not a shame blame game. So if you find that as we begin to uncover information about how we experience seasons or how we connect to other things, and something comes up for you about where you have a blind spot, it's not an opportunity to shame blame yourself about it. In my view, we're all essentially doing our best, and life is really about being up and down and being side to side and kind of floating around and being disconnected and being connected, and to just sort of let that be like the foundation of the whole thing. Like, I understand that we're all humans and nobody's playing it right 100% of the time. So that's it's important for me to sort of make that really clear, because that's not what this is about. And it really it has no space in any of this work to sort of shame blame yourself. Because of how we live, we're constantly on the go. We are planning our next move. We're in the future, we're in the past, we're sort of all over the place, except so much the present moment. And I think especially right now more than ever, we're living in many, many places at once. We're living in what we need to be doing and what we could have been doing. And I do think that all of that sort of serves a purpose, because to be out of the center with yourself gives you some moments to disconnect. And we probably can't be connected all the time, because if we were connected all the time, we would be, the monk living in the mountains, untouched by society, and that's just not who we are. So I love to give myself a little bit of slack around, my binge watching TV, or my like ordering out of food, or staying in bed all day. All of that sort of gets to play a part in how we experience seasons. All of it is a part of our life, and whether it's not changing out of your pajamas all day, or not brushing your teeth for a day, or eating cookies for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like it's essentially it's all okay. Um, but to remember that the seasons are changing. So you allow yourself to have whatever disconnecting experience you may be having, out of your center experience you may be having, and then you reorient or you let the ball keep rolling because the ball will eventually roll because we're not a square, we're a sphere. So to know that the disconnecting is essential and it's important, the other side of that must be true also, which is that connecting is essential. And for those of us, I'm sure all of us in this virtual room together, we all probably have some type of a practice, an introspective practice, whether it's um, you know, a movement practice or a breathing practice or a quiet stillness practice, some kind of a practice you have because it connects you and you've decided at some point along your path that that's an essential piece to existing on the planet. Um, so we can remember that we're all on the same page with all of this. We all sort of disconnect, we all connect. We're all playing the tap out part, the unplug part, and we're also all playing the plug in part. Um, and so one of my other sort of favorite things to say is that everything is true. So if, eating cookies one day for you is really healing, like that's true. And if the next day, only eating the vegetables from your garden is what's really healing for you, like that's true too. Everything gets to be true in this space. Next is that everything is changing. So everything is true, everything is changing. And because everything changes, we have to be ready to reorient ourselves over and over again. And because everything is changing, we have to be ready for new versions of ourselves to arise. And because everything is changing, you get to drop all of the shame and guilt that you have been carrying about changing some desire or changing some taste preference that you have or changing some feelings or thoughts or tendencies that you have. You get to drop it because it's eventually going to change. So let's all take a breath. For me, that has been a cornerstone of this practice, to allow myself to reorient over and over again, to allow myself to reinvent myself over and over again. And the biggest way that that I see this playing out in the world is when I see children and my relationships with children, because children have this really amazing thing where they wake up every day and they get to be somebody new. They get to have new experiences. They get to discover life in a new way. As we sort of get older and have our hard turtle shells on us that life has given us, it's harder for us to wake up in that same way where it's like, you know, I'm only eating apples today because I just love apples and that's just how it is. Like you hear kids say that and it's like that's the truth. Okay, like you're only eating apples. But for an adult, like we have it's hard for us to navigate in the world in that way because we have too many things from our past that keep us on one straight line. So when I look at kids, I think that for most of them, the idea of finding themselves is a really familiar place for them to exist in. They get to sort of wake up and do whatever it is that they're doing and have an experience about it. And that's just another inroad into who they are. But as adults, this idea of finding ourselves is it's really scary and it's overwhelming because we've probably spent most of our life hiding from ourselves. And I think that's both why this practice, any kind of introspective practice, sitting, moving, breathing, painting, doing dishes, folding laundry, putting your hands in the earth, is so powerful because it gives us these like glimpse moments of perhaps seeing ourselves for the first time in a long time. So you get to begin to unveil to yourself who you are. And that's both this like very big idea, and there's like a million books in the self help section of the library about it. But it's also this like very, very simple and normal thing that we see out in nature all the time. So you see things that emerge and then they change shape and they look completely different than they were to begin with. And nobody's fussing or fighting about it. It's just the way that it is. You see the caterpillar, who's this like cool, interesting caterpillar, and then has to go into this cocoon and make its little space and struggle, right? Caterpillar beating its wings against the side. And as a human looking at it, the human is like, oof, let me help you. But the caterpillar has to do its thing, because if it doesn't do its thing, its wings won't be strong enough for it to become the beautiful butterfly. But it changes dramatically. You see it with dandelions, right? Dandelions are like this beautiful, like yellow, like fuzzy sort of like like lion's mane, and then all of a sudden at the end of the summer they're like this like fluffy floating white ball. It's like totally different than what it was to begin with, and you don't really see the natural world kind of making a big deal about it. So for me, that's why I think being able to look outside into the natural world and play out whatever it is that I'm having in here and see it reflected out there can be soothing for my system, because I see that it's okay. I see that it's happening. I see that it's what's kind of probably always happened, and it's a reminder to me that that the self discovery is important, but also the shedding of skin is important too. Again, I'm giving the nature references. You may think about something totally different. You may think about cutting your hair, or changing your eyeshadow color. Like it's all important, and it all has space here. Um, so back to kids. And kids are, if you have kids, you see it. Kids are in so many ways our greatest teachers, because they are still tapped into something that we kind of get away from as we grow up. And one of the biggest pieces of it is imagination. And as adults, we sort of stop playing with our imagination in a big way. And those of us who stay with our imagination, and are able to have a big experience with the imagination, I think are people that we look to in like texts and books, and we're like, oh my God, this amazing painter, this amazing cook, or people who are really like creating something powerful, are people who are engaging with their imagination and able to sort of go in and have an inner landscape. Kids are doing it all the time, right? Kids live in their imagination, and it's marvelous. It's something that you look at kids playing in a park or in a field, and you see nothing but the two of them, and yet there's like this whole huge inner world happening that they're getting to play out. So as we begin to dive into seasons, as you on your own create your own experience of seasons, this is really your deep imagination work. And we get to be influenced by looking outside the window or walking outside in the neighborhood. But a lot of it is actually diving into yourself and letting yourself have an experience with your imagination. Um, so, um, I'm going to put up something that I want us to read together. Two things. Let's see. Can you guys see this? Wild geese? Can you give me a head nod? Do you see wild geese or no? No. Hold on. Let's see. You see the sometimes one? Yeah. So I'm going to read this and you can read it too. And if you want to take a picture of the screen, you can also. Sometimes what is meant for you can't find you simply because you aren't being yourself. And you can read it again. I know for me, I like to read these things many times and allow myself to really feel it. But this is sort of that image of seeing some kids playing in a park, and you just see the two children, and yet they're having like a really big experience. They're being able to interact with a much bigger world than what we see because they're allowing themselves to be themselves. And that's, I think, what is so integral to all of this is our own ability to dive in and get really inquisitive. And what I didn't mention, I guess, in the beginning, but which is really important now and always, is that this work is really private. So as you begin to go inside and develop your relationships with yourself and whatever it is that you're connecting to feel a sense of groundedness, that's all really private, personal stuff that you never have to share with anyone else. And this idea of, sometimes what is meant for you can't find you simply because you aren't being yourself. You don't really have to show anybody else yourself if you don't want to show anybody else yourself. So all of this work is really private, intimate work. You can journal about it. You could write poetry about it. You could, scream about it in your bedroom. It's all yours to have in whatever way that you need to have it. And if by chance you decide you want to share it with other people, you have sovereignty over your own experience. So you get to choose if and when any of this is something that is meant to be shared with your family or your acquaintances or your colleagues. But this idea of finding yourself doesn't have to be on public display. It can, but it's actually a really, really personal, private experience. So as you begin to find yourself, as you begin to go in and get inquisitive and sort of light up the billboard on the highway that says you matter, you begin to create a picture of who you are in the moment. And this is when, imagination can really be helpful because you get to go in, whether it's on your walk or it's when you're making breakfast or when you're brushing your teeth. And these questions, these sort of like big existential questions that we don't really ask of like, who am I, can become part of normal dialogue. And it doesn't have to be, who am I? I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. It could be, who am I? I'm somebody who really loves to wear turtlenecks. That's me. I love to wear turtlenecks. I'm somebody who sleeps with a hot water bottle. That's me. I'm somebody who really likes coffee in the morning. So it's like, it doesn't have to be, just because it's a big existential question, it doesn't have to be a big existential answer. But these little, what feel like very light, kind of mundane answers begin to create a larger picture. So as you begin to create your picture, all of it is allowed to exist. All of it is allowed to be in there. There's nothing that gets to be sort of swept out with the trash if you don't want it to be, just because you feel like maybe it's not important enough or not as big of a deal as some of the other things. I think, well, let's take a seat together. So just sit up in any way that's comfortable, maybe in a chair or on the floor or on a couch, or if you're laying down and you're really good like that, you can also just lay down. And let your gaze sort of soften. So maybe you drop your gaze to the floor or it's out ahead of you. Or if you're comfortable, your eyelids could get heavy and your eyes could close. But begin to arrive here in this sort of still seated place with yourself and take some breaths. And you get to see, is your breath fast and quick like a hummingbird? Or is your breath slow and soft like a leaf floating down a lazy river? Is it somewhere in between? And if you're the leaf floating down the lazy river, would you prefer to be the hummingbird? Or if you're the hummingbird, would you prefer to be the leaf? And if you've decided that you'd like to reorient and head towards another breath pattern, you can. You can decide if you want to make more space between the inhale and the exhale, or if it feels better for you to let things be tighter together. And then the beauty of it is that you can change your mind. Over and over again, you can change your mind. And as you begin to develop a breath pattern that works for you in this moment, allow yourself to feel connected downwards into something. Maybe the chair that you're sitting on, maybe the soil of the earth that's below your home, maybe all the way down into the molten core of the earth. And then also feel yourself rise up. Maybe you feel the air over top the crown of the head. Maybe you sense the ceiling above you, or the roof of the building you're in, or the sky up above that. And then begin to sense the front of your body. Maybe you feel the abdomen expanding and contracting as you inhale and exhale. Maybe you feel how the lungs widen forward. Maybe you even tip yourself just a teensy bit forward so you feel into that forward moving energy. And then you sense your back, the backs of the lungs. Maybe you tip yourself back just a little bit. The back of the skull, the back of the neck. And you sense your right arm, your right leg, your right ear, your right eye. Maybe you lean a little bit to the right, and then you just get to play yourself in that direction. And then you sense your left side, your left leg, your left arm, your left ear, your left eye. You could lean a little bit in that direction and just feel how you can reorient. And then find yourself in the middle. And you can turn your head just slightly towards the right and take a few breaths. Maybe you notice how that gives you more information about the right side of your body or your right lung, because now what's behind you is different and what's in front of you is different. And you get to turn your head just a little, very gently, to the left. And it's a new experience. What's in front of you is different. What's behind you is different. Maybe you get a little bit more information about your left lung, about your left side body. And then find yourself back in the middle. Notice your many sides. Notice yourself as something that is spherical. And allow yourself to be in the middle. You can begin using your brilliant imagination to paint a picture of who you are in this moment. You get to begin to weave together ideas and feelings and thoughts. What colors you're being drawn to, or smells and tastes, landscapes you love, people you love, plants that are important to you, fabrics you love to wear or see, musical instruments. Choose something that comes to you as a representation of you in this moment. Maybe it's the soup that you made yesterday, or maybe it's the wren atop the tree that you saw. Maybe it's the flower whose petals are all curled together because of the rain. And you get to see that whatever it is that's come to you comes from within you. You get to see it rise up from inside of you. It's yours, very privately yours. Whatever it is that you brought up, whatever it is that you allowed to exist in your space, let it absorb into you. It's completely yours. And you get to find yourself in the middle of your own experience. You can take a breath or two or three. And if your eyes were closed, you can open them again. This is a poem by Mary Oliver. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be the weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention and patch a few words together. And don't try to make it elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence into which another voice may speak. And so maybe that's a meditation. Maybe for you, it's a breathing practice. Maybe it's just an opportunity to listen. So, seasonality. Seasonality for me is one of the easiest ways that I begin to have a view of myself as a cyclical creature participating in nature. We all see and experience seasons depending on where we live in the world. They can be very dramatic or they can be very soft and fluid. Perhaps we have a favorite season, or perhaps you have a season that you really don't love. Um, Either way, we all relate to the seasons in one way or another. We have stories about them and experiences, and they're very rich with content um, because they're a part of our existence as who we are on the planet. And that's why they can be a really beautiful ally in our work in being grounded. Like I said before, seasons change and they remind us that we too can change as well. They also follow a rhythm, and we're reminded that we too follow a rhythm. They will eventually come and go just in the same way that we do. And so we find spring, and maybe this is a moment for you to grab your pen and your notebook if you have it. And I'm gonna just share with you what I think of as spring, sort of very like baseline spring identifiers, and you could write them down. But I would also love for you to maybe write down a few words um, that are very much your own about how you relate to spring. So spring is about energy that moves upwards. Spring is rising. Spring is new growth. Um, that also means that spring is painful. So we look out into the natural world and we see things beginning to sprout through the soil, and it's very exciting for those of us who have played a part in planting them. But it's also, I would imagine, a very painful journey for the little seed to break through its hull and travel upwards through the dark, seeking out some light and air and water. So I think it's important to remind ourselves that coupled with new growth and rising upwards and potential is also growing pains and what can be sort of scary. Um, Spring is crisp days, it's a welcoming back of the sun, it's new life, it's emergence. So maybe you've written down a few things, but let that be something that you can continually add to about your own experience of spring, and we'll sort of circle back to this. And so after spring comes summer, right? And um, summer is ripening. Summer is full bloom. Summer is what we like to think of as the pregnant pause. So it's everything being really, really full and big, and it's sun really high in the sky. It's long days and warm nights. And you can sort of add to that. What is summer? And then what we have next is autumn. And autumn is the descent into ourselves. It's leaves falling off the tree and giving themselves back to the earth. So that's a return back inwards. It's also it's sort of a time of remembrance and memories, because as leaves fall from trees and make their way back down to the roots of the tree, it's having an integration of your memories from up above and bringing them back into the private places of yourself. So I think of autumn as sort of the time to go in the attic and take out your old photographs of your family, or to take out your your favorite sweater that you've got at the thrift store 10 years ago, that holds memories. Um, Autumn is coming home, going back in. It's returning to our lineage, and lineage can be the lineage that you've been given through um, through your parents, or your lineage can be your chosen lineage, and it can be people that you decide to put into that mix, like your favorite poets or your favorite cooks or your favorite actors or your favorite animals. They can all be a part of your lineage. And winter is the cave. Winter is it's darkness, it's isolation. It's really going in. It's like um, being the spelunker, right? The person who goes and explores deep down in the caves. Whereas summer is the pregnant pause, winter is the empty pause. So they get to be two sides of the same coin. Um, and winter is also sort of like a return to nothingness, to like a zero point. And just like the cycle keeps moving, you get to drop down to that very sort of quiet cave. And then what happens again is spring on the other side, is that sort of painful growth, that seed bursting through the hull, that very like noisy activity of little birds out in the trees, which is not winter. So I encourage you to really sort of flesh that out for yourself, and this can be like a forever ongoing thing that you begin to create language around seasons and how you experience seasons. Um, so I just want to bring this up for us to look at. And so I sort of spoke at the beginning about how the more we can create a relationship with something over and over again, it gives us um, more dialogue. Do you guys see this? Just as you can pick out the voice, you can see it clearly. Cool. I'm going to read it to you. It's by the quote from Robin Wall Kimmer's book. Just as you can pick out the voice of a loved one in the tumult of the noisy room, or spot your child's smile in a sea of faces, intimate connection allows recognition in an all too often anonymous world. The sense of connection arises from a special kind of discrimination, a search image that comes from a long time spent looking and listening. Intimacy gives us a different way of seeing when visual acuity is not enough. If you want to grab a picture of that or something, I'm going to take it off here. But so this really highlights the idea of creating your own sort of dictionary of how you experience seasons, because it is something that we inevitably experience over and over again, both as a very intimate and personal thing, but also as an outer participatory thing in the world. So I love this because it's like, to me, the more that I've engaged with this work on my own in a very private way, the more both the change of seasons in the outer world and my own personal experience of changing of seasons of myself, I pay attention to and I flush out, the more it's like spotting that familiar person that I know. And I may have swayed away from her at one point, and then I get to revisit her again. And so it's like, you haven't done your walk out in the grass for 3 months because it's been winter and the grass has been covered in snow, and you go out for your first spring walk in the grass, and it's this like flooding back in of all of these I would say all of these friends that you've made that you have a connection to. So to begin to make a wider catalog of language around your own experience of being a cyclical being, being a part of a natural world that's alive and pulsing. So I loved this Robin Wall Kimmer quote. And if you haven't read her book, it's an amazing book called Braiding Sweetgrass. But so you begin to develop this experience with seasons, and I would love for us to do a little breath practice, and it's called the Breath of the Seasons, and it's one of my favorites because what you find is that um, you can at any moment access any piece of the seasons inside of you. And so with this breath practice, I really encourage you again to begin to engage with your imagination and let it be this very inside, private experience that's yours. So, allow yourself to be comfortable, if that's sitting in a chair or the couch or laying down. And remember that we allow ourselves to have experiences on many sides of the body, and this is sort of one of those, that you get to feel the front and back and sides and tops and bottoms, so that you see yourself as sort of something that's moving around out in nature, like the planet moving around out in the cosmos. So find a comfortable way to be. Maybe you just let your gaze soften to the floor or out ahead of you, or maybe you're comfortable with letting the eyelids get heavy, and you just begin to notice your breath. And maybe it's quick and fast, or maybe it's slow and sweet, but you just notice. We'll all take a breath in together and a breath out together. And you'll inhale up the front of your body, up the abdomen, up the chest, up the throat, up the face. That's spring rising. Overhead, you'll hold the breath just for a second. That's summer ripening. You'll exhale down the back of your body, down the back of the head, down the back. That's fall, autumn descending. And then you'll hold the breath out for a moment underneath you, and that's the cave of winter. Inhale up the front for spring, spring rising. Hold the breath overhead for a moment, that's summer ripening. Exhale down the back is autumn, descending down into ourselves. And holding the breath out underneath us for a moment is the empty pause of winter. Inhale up the front of your body for spring and begin to paint your picture of spring. Overhead, you hold the breath for a moment, and that's summer. Let the exhale fall down the back of you, that's autumn. And hold the breath out underneath you, that's winter. Inhale, everything rises. Hold the breath, is high in the sky, summer. Exhale down the back of the body is autumn. And you get to hold the breath out underneath you, the quietness of winter. You'll do a few more rounds like this, feeling spring rise. Feeling summer ripe. Feeling autumn descend. And feeling the quietness of winter. You're painting this very private, intimate picture. You get to go in and play seasons. You get to play them inside of you. And what you'll notice is you gravitate towards one part of the breath. Maybe it's easier to be with the inhale, or maybe you're very comfortable in that empty pause. You get to see where you're most comfortable, where you have access to experience and insight. You also get to see where it's hard for you to go. You get to see what feels difficult, or perhaps where you're cheating yourself, where you shy away from. Not as an opportunity to give yourself a hard time, but as an opportunity to gather more insight about your experience. Maybe it's easiest for you to be in winter. You feel comfortable and safe there. You feel like you can dive in and stay for a while. And so you play with that. You give yourself time. But then you begin to edge in a new direction. We don't always want to stay where we feel most comfortable. We want to make sure we're harmonizing ourselves. And so we play all sides. The more time we give ourselves in different directions, different seasons, the more insight we gain about ourselves. And this isn't a practice for anyone other than us, just you, just your experience, your embodiment, your practice. The more intimate you become with your own seasons, the more time you spend investigating yourself, the more you get curious about yourself. It's nobody's business but your own, what you're experiencing, what comes to you, what you gravitate towards. For some of us, the change of seasons inside of us can be very quick, or we can linger for a really long time. And it's nobody's business. But you get to know that you will not be forever in your winter. At some point, maybe in a minute, maybe in a year, you'll begin to break through the hull. You'll begin to grow something. It could be painful. The move away from the cave is painful. The cave is so held and dark. Think of the bear hibernating. The bear loves the cave. The bear asleep in its den. The act of moving out from the den isn't easy. The idea of hunting out in the world, moving those creaky limbs. But the bear does it because the bear is guided by something that we've lost touch with. The bear is guided by their deep intuition. The bear knows that out there on the other side of pain and disturbance is abundance, is communion, is something completely other than the dark cave she's been asleep in. So you begin to investigate your seasons in your own way. You can drop the breath practice. You can drop the weave around yourself and just let yourself experience what you created. Let yourself just marinate in it. You can slowly make your way back into our shared space. And I have this up on the screen that just says it's all an invitation. All of these moments of investigating the inside for the outside is an invitation. Doesn't have to be anything more than that. Doesn't have to be bigger or smaller, but it's an invitation to yourself, to that journey inwards. I want to first just give you guys like an optional little homework assignment, because I think that some people kind of like that stuff, and if you're somebody that likes it, then totally listen and write it down. And if you're somebody that's like, no way, homework, then just listen and let it float out the window, and that's totally cool. But this is a syllabus for seasons. So we can assume that we're operating under the idea that we could wake up tomorrow morning and you could realize that you wake up and you're in your fall season. You wake up and you just feel it. You're like, as I begin to develop more language and understanding around what fall means for me, I know that today I'm in my fall season, or spring, or winter, or summer. So let's start with spring. You can write spring you can write spring, and you would write a syllabus for what you would do if you woke up and you're having a spring day, whatever that means, right? We said that spring is rising, spring's kind of chatty, spring can be a little painful, it's growing, it's kind of still crisp. These are all my words around spring, but you can use your own. So I have a little, it's a couple of samples of what this could be, and you can take from this, or you can just tune me out. But a syllabus for spring could be, you would write poetry about growth. You could clean out your closet, or grab the broom and do some sweeping. You could make some nice kind of cool drink, like if you love lemonade or you love iced coffee. This is one of my personal favorites, and I do it really very, very frequently, is I change the background of my phone. And it's like something that we all sort of look at all the time. And so many of us just like have just like some background on there that we put on there like 3 years ago, and it's the same one. But I have found that I really love to change the background of my phone depending on how I feel in that day. And I have just kind of like this collection of photographs from Pinterest and that I've taken that I use. And so you could change the background on your phone to a springy style, thing. And then you get to have an experience every time you look at your phone that is maybe perhaps in alignment with how you feel inside energetically. You could do like an energetic-y practice. Spring is a little bit more movement, whereas winter is much closer to the earth. Spring, you could do some jumping jacks, or you could do some cartwheels outside, or you could do a brisk walk. You could just hop around on your mat or on your floor. And spring is lung stuff, so you could do some really nice twisting, or drink some lovely tea that's really supportive for your lungs. That would be a spring syllabus. And then you would do your summer. So if you woke up and you're feeling Katie, like you're feeling like I can really hold the top of that inhale for a long time, that vibe, maybe you put on some really lovely like yellow colors, to dress in alignment with how you feel. You could take a cat nap in a sunny window. You could drink something like orange juice or eat ice cream, or make like a gazpacho. There's like a lot of fun ways to do that. And then you could do a cooling practice, right? In the summer, we don't want to probably do like a uh, super fast heated kind of experience. We want to like do a little bit of cooling, slower stuff. Um, and then you would do your autumn syllabus. So you wake up and you're feeling very autumn like you. For me, I would pull out old photographs or pull out some of my like favorite clothing that's very like warm and cozy. You could make an altar for your ancestors, place like a picture of your grandmother, or pull out a recipe that is passed down from your family and make that recipe. You could wear earth tones if you're, dressing in rhythm with the seasons. You could make tea and broths, or drink tea and broths, take a bath. And yeah, and then last on the bottom of the spiral is winter. And so if you wake up and you're having a wintry day, right, like stay in bed, don't even get out of bed to make tea and crawl back in, or make your hot water bottle, or, you know, um, stay off social media and kind of retreat, maybe put your phone away and don't really be with your phone for the day because you're feeling wintry and sort of in that place of wanting to kind of isolate. And knowing that with any of these, in a moment, the 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 cycle keeps going. And so, maybe you're feeling in the retreaty kind of place, but what I find is that to be able to honor it and sort of find a way to harmonize with it, to ground into it, I'm more likely to kind of get over that hump and transition into a new part, because I've harmonized with something, rather than to sort of push it away and have too much of a resistance towards something. Then I tend to just kind of stay in that place for a long period of time. So that's your sort of syllabus, your homework is to write up like what a day would be like to be in each season, or what an activity would be like to be in each season. And then the second part of that is like to actually put it in practice, so that, you get to begin to have an experience with it, because it works to be a way for you to develop your own relationship with self-healing and self-soothing, in the sense that, from my understanding, your own you as your person, your own voice is the most healing sound out in the planet for you. Eventually, one day, your own touch is the most healing touch out in the planet for you. The sound of your own breath, your own breathing, is the most healing breath out in the planet for you. So as you begin to harmonize yourself with other things, as you begin to ask questions about your experience with the outside world, you reflect back asking questions about your experience on the inside world. You see that you're able to have your back, really. This is a practice about having your own back. And if that means allowing yourself to be in a winter space, you allow yourself to be in a winter space. If that means that you've been in a winter space too long, and on the other side of winter is spring, you call that in. You call in what it is that you are familiar with about spring that can urge you out of your cave. So you begin to see that you're having a very dynamic, very alive relationship with yourself. And that essentially, it's all an invitation. It's all an invitation to get to know yourself better. It's all an invitation to harmonize and feel connected and feel supported. And it's all yours privately. It's all yours to have an experience with in a very quiet inner way, in the sense that you have sovereignty over your own experiences and your own practices. And that's, a really important piece to all of this, is that You're the one driving the ship. You're the one steering the car. You're the one turning the key on in the ignition. You're the one who's getting to decide when you make a right and when you make a left, when you stop, when you move forward. You're you're the one who's calling the shots with how you're having an experience moving forward, and what you get to develop your experiences with. Um, so I want to just read this one to you guys. This is one of my favorites, and sort of is one of those ones that really talks it to my heart. I'll read it. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. I hope that you're able to maybe see or feel a speck of that you have a very clear place held for you in the family of all experience and um, all the natural world offers to us. That you and your uniqueness are a very integral part to all of us having an experience here on the planet. And my wish is that you can take um, even just a little bit of what I've offered today and allow it to become something that is yours and that you develop on your own, and that it only brings you deeper and deeper into your own heart. Um, Thank you so much for listening to all of the insides of my own heart being sort of laid out on display.